Hey, this is Michael Lindsay from Vital MX. We're out here at 212 Land to kick off our multiple days of testing for the 2017 250F Shootout. So, per our usual, we have a giant in-depth article with all 6 of our test riders' opinion from multiple days of testing. We have dyno charts, we have data acquisition from Lit Pro, but for you guys that want it short and sweet, we also have this video and we're going to jump right into the results. 6th place is the Suzuki RMZ 250. Sad to say, per the same as the last couple years, the Suzuki is down at the bottom of the charts. Why? Power, purely that power. It just feels a little bit lacking compared to every model in the class. It's not that the bike is bad, it's just everything has taken another step ahead of this model. When it comes down to comfort, everybody agrees that the chassis is amazing, that it corners like no other, and it's just really easy to ride. The suspension has a huge amount of adjustment, and a lot of people were able to find things they liked in the setup. If it just had more power, it would definitely go up the rankings. Settling in 5th place is the Honda CRF 250R. Last year, this bike gained quite a few upgrades and moved up the standings. This year, though, there was nothing new on the model, and with some other upgrades in the rest of the class, it slipped back down the charts. Really, the bike is extremely agile. A lot of guys love how you can throw this thing around. It's different than the Suzuki in the turning aspect. It does turn great because it's just such an easy bike to throw into stuff. It's maybe not the most stable bike at high speed, but it just makes you feel really in control on tight tracks just because of how you're able to manhandle the bike. For the power, it's great low to mid. The upgrades they made last year were a huge help, but it still signs off early. It doesn't give you that 250 scream it out feel that really matches with this chassis you can throw around. If the forks were just a little bit easier to manage on this bike and it definitely pulled through the rest of the range, this bike would settle up a little bit higher in the rankings. So probably the largest surprise definitely in this shootout is 4th place, the Yamaha YZ250F. I gotta admit, I was shocked. Most of the test riders were shocked as well. This bike won easily last year and has been dominating the shootouts. Now, how did it get 4th? It's a combination of the other bikes getting better and the honest opinion of our guys thinking that the 17 is slightly worse than the previous model. They've made some upgrades to the engine, which are better. The Yamaha is still fantastically powerful for a 250F and just pulls higher gears like no other. But the suspension settings and just changes they made with the chassis unbalanced the bike this year, and everybody just struggled with it. And it was a lot of things with unbalance. It felt like the bike would never settle under braking. It was constantly moving the fork through the stroke. You couldn't get a good grasp of how much to get on the brakes. You couldn't get to settle into the corner, accelerate out. If you could just rail out sides everywhere, it was amazing. To really try to fight it into a rut just felt like a mission all day. And a lot of the changes we made just really wasn't able to quite clean this up. So it's really tough to say the Yamaha slipped to where it is because it still has absolutely fantastic power. But between the struggle with the suspension and it definitely being what feels like the widest bike in the class, it definitely felt like you were having to manhandle a little too much, and that's why it slipped to where it is. Coming in on the edge of the podium in 3rd is the Kawasaki KX 250F. Kawi's always been really known in the 250 class for having a bike that's very aggressive. You hang off the back of this bike, you scream it, and in 17 they've taken that a step farther. The new engine improvements are really geared towards that mid to top, and you just feel like you're killing it on this 250. You ride it so aggressively. Chassis-wise, they've kind of struggled in the past with front end grip. It's still not the best there, but with the improvements they have made, it definitely has more front end traction than they've had in the past. It's not the most balanced chassis out there, but it definitely puts them in a higher rating than they've had. Coming to the engine, it is lacking a bit low to mid in pure power compared to its competitors, but it's so well mapped and crisp, it's really deceiving for the guys because it takes that power it has down low and uses it best as it can. The shock works very well. It's great to ride across rough sections. Now the fork is a bit stiff for that Target 250 rider. The SFF spring fork is a little bit oversprung. For the bigger guys it worked. For the light guys it definitely felt topped out. It kind of works for the way the chassis is, but if you want it to settle in the front, that's its biggest struggle. If it was a little more balanced with the chassis and it had a little more complete low end, this bike would also rank up there as well, and that's kind of what it's missing. So landing in 2nd place is the Husqvarna FC250. What has this bike got going for it to bring it so far up in the rankings this year? It's just a great overall package, not for just one rider, but for almost every one of our guys. They've really killed it with the engine. It's just so well balanced. There's no point in the power band where you feel like you're lacking. It's got great low to mid. It's not as strong hitting off the bottom as maybe the Yamaha, but it's still very much there, and it builds into a great mid-range and just screams to the top by making the most horsepower in the class. When it comes to the chassis, once again, extremely well balanced. You've got a bike that feels very planted front and rear. The front with the great brakes, you can dive tight inside, you can knife it into stuff. At the same time though, you can hang it wide into a berm and rail it. It's just really at no point do you feel like you're struggling with the chassis. It's really easy with the suspension to make a couple little changes to suit it to you. And that's still where they really nailed it this year, is the suspension. WP's rear shock is very adjustable, even from our lightest to our biggest guys. Everybody was able to find something that suited them, and same with the new WP AER 48 air fork. It was a great move getting away from 4CS. This fork is really good for an air fork because the initial feel is there and it ramps up so quick and has so much bottoming resistance. Once again, across every weight, there wasn't really a complaint, just a little air pressure change and clicker changes, and you were able to find your spot. So if the Husqvarna is as good as we say, how did it not take the top spot? Because first place was taken by the KTM 250 SXF. Most people would say, well, yeah, obviously the bikes are the same, aren't they? We've been extremely critical in the past, and we still are. They are not the same. The KTM took the top spot because it's just a little bit better. And it comes down to one of the biggest differences. The Husqvarna has a one-piece subframe and airbox. This changes the power characteristics and even the entire chassis characteristics in a lot of little ways. The KTM just feels more responsive. The engine revs a little bit quicker than the Husky. We proved on the dyno, all the riders said it, and this translates to how the chassis works. It's a little bit easier to snap in and out of corners, and it just makes the KTM overall feel like a more aggressive 250F than the Husqvarna. And then when you compare it to the rest of the class, it's almost as good as the Yamaha off the bottom. It builds great mid-range, but it's even better than the Kawasaki up top, giving it the most well-rounded engine. In the chassis department, yeah, the Suzuki, we feel a lot of guys like it could probably outturn it in the tight situations, but it's right there with it. Even when it came to the suspension, whether you were tall, short, heavy, light, we were able to make this thing work for basically every test ride with just a few minor changes. And that's what's so unique about how this bike finished. There's a lot of diversity in everybody's comments that you can see with all these bikes, but when it came down to the KTM, almost every single guy picked it first, and that's simply why it took the top spot. And that's a wrap on the 2017 250F Shootout. But if you want to figure out why each bike finished where they were in each rider's individual opinion, we have a massive in-depth article. We put a ton of work in so you can see all 6 riders' individual opinion on each motorcycle to figure out all the positives and the negatives. And if you want to see that, click the link at the bottom of the article, and we'll see you come 450 Shootout time.